Fantastic. I think we're live. Yes. We have participants. Fantastic. We've got viewers coming in. Wonderful. I'll give people a moment to come in and then we'll get started. We're live.
Yay.
How exciting. Is this all? I just gave a really hyped up introduction, so hopefully lots of people are excited about what we're about to do. So I'm going to kick off. Welcome to everyone. Hello and welcome to the Better Futures Forum. If this is your first session that you're joining for, but I'm sure lots of people have heard so many inspiring things, so many informative, fantastic speakers already. My name is Emma Bacon and I'll be your host today. I'm the Executive Director and the founder of Sweltering Cities. We work with communities in our hottest suburbs to organise, advocate and campaign for more livable, equitable and sustainable cities and climate action. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that today we're meeting on First Nations land. I'm joining you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I think when we do acknowledgements of country, we should also consider how, we're thinking about First Nations leadership in the climate movement. And just wanted to say that recently we were working with a doctor in the western suburbs of Sydney who is a Wiradjuri man. And I asked him, what is something that we should be doing for your community, with your community, led by your community when it comes to tackling extreme heat in Western Sydney. And the solution, he said, was that there should be a First Nations run, devised and led health hub that includes community support, a connection to country, social support for different people, and that is the number one thing that he could describe for his community. And so when we're thinking of solutions, when we're going through solutions today and our ideas, we should think about how we can listen to First Nations people and take leadership from those communities when it comes to, how we are going to build the resilient, sustainable, net zero carbon cities of our future. So we have 4 fantastic speakers today, and we've asked them all to answer the question, what is the single most important action Australia can take towards building resilient, equitable and net zero carbon cities? And so we're going to hear from our 4 speakers, and then we're going to have a discussion coming out of what they've said and also, exploring them a bit further. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to encourage our delegates to use the chat feature located on the right-hand side of your screen. We encourage you to share your own research, links or thoughts on the session topics. We're definitely keen to hear people's ideas, links. We want to keep in touch. When you come to our Q&A, you can either write your question in the Q&A tab or virtually raise your hand, and we'll bring you into the session with video and audio when appropriate. Don't write your questions in the chat feature because they might get lost and we won't see them. If you need to contact our events team or tech support, navigate to your inbox at the top of your screen and search event support for instant chat. So I would like to welcome our first speaker. We'll now hear from Dr. Evelyne Leeuw. Evelyne is a professor of urban health political science and the director of the Centre for Health Equity Training, Research and Evaluation, or CHETRA, and Healthy Environments Collaboratory. She's based in Southwest Sydney, but her work has global reach. She came to Australia 16 years ago after having spent time in the Netherlands, Kazakhstan, Denmark, Canada, and El Salvador. She's written and edited a couple of books and several hundred articles. Check out her short-sighted sycophant selfie, which is the first thing I'm going to do after this session. The crux of her current work is a boundary spanning between research, policy, practice, and experience. So please welcome Evelyne.
Thank you, Emma. Fantastic introduction. Of course, that prompts me to say even more about all of those things, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. My one thing that we could do is give communities the option, the opportunity, the drive, the motivation, the control to actually take control of their health environment. So remember, I'm in health. So health environment is a thing. It is not just your lifestyle, what you choose to eat, to move, etc. It is much broader than that. And so communities taking control of their health environment is in line with a document called the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion. And this is something very standard for health people, but maybe not for others. The Ottawa Charter defines health promotion as enabling individuals, groups, and communities to take control over the determinants of their health. And lifestyle is only a minute factor in determinants of health. There are all these other things that enable you to live the healthiest life possible. And in the health field, we call those things the social determinants, the commercial determinants, and the political determinants of health. And we in health promotion, we try to enable people to actually control those things. So it's not about lifestyle. It's not about behaviorism. It's not about individuals. It's about community. And if we want to enable people to control their urban fate, they need to be able to control service access and social and urban planning. Why do I say that? Well, since 1986, I've been involved with the World Health Organization's Healthy Cities program. And actually, I wrote the book about it. So I'm not sharing any screen, but I'm just holding up my book, Healthy Cities, subtitled The Theory, Policy, and Practice of Value-Based Urban Planning. I showed this once to a board of a philanthropy, and the commercial people there said, value-based urban planning, that's good. It turned out that they had different ideas about value than what I had. For me, value-based urban planning is urban planning that's driven by things like solidarity, the good of participation, sustainability, equity, etc., etc. So it is possible to formally engage people in value-based urban planning. Doing healthy cities, and we have 15,000 of those around the world, deliberately recognizes that people can be engaged in the settings where their lives take shape to determine how best shape those settings. And settings is not just cities, it's also environments within cities, the home, the neighborhood, the school, markets, and there's even healthy prisons if you're interested in things like that. So is that a pipe dream? Is that just some fantasy that 15,000 cities around the world have signed up to? No. There is an abundance of evidence that getting people to commit to these things and work on their own control of those higher up factors, the determinants of health, is possible and yields much better results than top-down planning, the institutions of government. It's not just supplemental, it should drive the institutions of government. Examples? Well, I come from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands we have mandated women's advisory councils, and they're required to shine a light on housing and urban planning submissions. So if a new neighborhood is built, the Women's Advisory Council needs to look at these things, and they give fantastic feedback on very simple things about how you see the world from your house, for instance. In Miller, Southwest Sydney, where we're active with Chetra, we collaborate with the Children's Parliament, and don't think that children don't have the ability to control the determinants of health. Children do. In healthy cities in Europe, you see people's councils where everybody in the community comes together in massive gatherings to set priorities about health and urban planning. And a classic in this space is participatory budgeting, invented in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, decades ago. But go to the World Bank website and find out that participatory budgeting, people controlling the budget of their local government, actually is a very effective way of driving change. That's it.
Thank you, Evelyne. That I feel like I just wrote down about 50 notes of things I want to follow up, but values-based urban planning.
Yep.
What a great idea. Mandated women's advisory councils. I wonder what our suburbs would look like if we had systems like that. Let's talk about it after this. So thank you, Evelyne. We're now going to hear from Rob McLeod. So Rob leads the Climate Resilient Homes campaign at Renew, where he works on policy advocacy to make Australia's homes healthier and more energy efficient. He's worked on housing, homelessness, and climate issues as a community organiser, caseworker, and policy advisor. And I'm so glad we've got him here today. Please welcome Rob.
Thank you so much. And to all of the organisers of the event, I'd really like to acknowledge that I'm dialing in from Wurundjeri country. So there's lots of things that I'd like to make the one big thing, but there's one really big thing, and that's getting Australia's homes off gas. I think that people attending this forum know that Australia needs to get off gas as soon as possible. And residential gas is a really, really big part of the puzzle. In the eastern states of Australia, about 20% of our domestic gas use is in our homes. And in Victoria, that's well over 40%. It's over 60% if you include small businesses. And so at that residential level, the transition from gas is really, really important, because there just isn't a pathway to shutting down our gas supply and shutting down and getting off this dirty fuel without going through our homes and without getting our homes off gas. So that's what I'm really keen to talk about today. The first thing to say is that we know how to do it. There's a really big conversation going on about what the future of the gas network should be, and whether we should be replacing the fuel, whether we should be how we should be approaching that. But for homes, we have the answer already, and that is electrification. By and large, it's something that is available to us right now. So in homes, most of the gas use is in space heating, and that is followed by water heating. We can do those things now with heat pump technology, which is developed and is more efficient than other types of home energy anyway. So by using heat pump reverse cycle air conditioners and heat pump hot water, as well as induction cooking, which has also come a long way, we can actually disconnect homes straight away from the gas network. And that's a really, really important thing. It's happening right now. Crucially, it's cost effective and it's viable today, like in 2021. And I think a lot of people around the country don't actually realise that this is the shape of things. But it saves, if you're building a home tomorrow, you will save money by going all electric. And over the course of 10 years or the life of your mortgage, you can save a really serious amount of money by doing that, because you don't have to pay the gas network fees, you don't have to pay gas connection, you're saving money on energy bills through using solar energy in your home. And this is actually cheaper than going any other way. Renew does a whole bunch of analysis of the benefits to households, and it's pretty typical that you might be saving about 80% of your energy bill, reducing your bill from thousands down to a few hundred by going all electric over the course of a year. Now, for existing homes which are already standing and already have a gas connection, it's a bit more complicated, because retrofitting and replacing those appliances costs upfront money. But still, in a whole lot of cases, in most locations around the country, you'll still come out ahead by doing that. And so that's a really important thing that we think people need to understand. And increasingly, people do. This is already happening. And I think that we right now are in the early stages of what is a really major transition away from residential gas use. The early adopters are already on it. More and more people are dropping gas. And there are if you go to the online groups to talk about this stuff, there are tens of thousands of people on there who are talking about action in their own home already. We at Renew are speaking to builders and developers all the time who are coming to us because they want advice, because they want to offer a gas-free product, because they see the writing on the wall and they see the decisions that people are going to be making with their wallets really, really soon. Governments are also getting on board too. The ACT is planning to block new gas connections to greenfield estates very, very soon. And councils like Yarra in Melbourne and others are planning to do the same thing as well. Crucially, and this is something that is very important, we need to be planning for this now, because if we leave this transition just to the market and just to people making decisions in their own homes, we risk leaving people behind, and we risk an unjust transition to residential gas, and we can't let this happen. There's a serious risk that unequal access to renewables and storage could lead to greater inequality and exclusion if we don't plan for it now. So, as an example, a homeowner who's installed solar and has bought an electric vehicle that they can use the battery to store that energy will all of a sudden not be dependent on buying petrol, buying gas, and will have reduced bills, be better off. Whereas you compare their situation to a renter whose landlord hasn't given them permission to make retrofits to their home, or can't install solar without landlord permission, and is still having to pay for petrol. They're actually worse off in compounding ways, and that's a really, really serious issue. There's a few really key barriers that need to be addressed along these lines. So renters make up 30% of households and are facing particular barriers to the transition from gas. Social housing residents have really constrained energy choices in a lot of cases, and have specific things that that their landlords need to be doing to meet this challenge. And the upfront, for people who are living in homes with a gas connection, the upfront costs can be prohibitive for a lot of people. And if you're on a low income, the upfront cost of buying new appliances, is out of reach. Even if it saves you money in the long term, which it absolutely will, but perversely it locks people into paying higher energy bills because they can't afford the upfront cost of an upgrade. So this is a really key issue. I'd like to just wrap up this really, really quick rundown by saying that this is a really major opportunity. Governments can be investing now in homes and universal access to renewables and universal access to renewable power in the home instead of gas. And if by doing that, we can create jobs and we can fix existing inequalities and existing problems that exist in our community right now. The coronavirus pandemic is still very much here, as everyone here is aware, and we do need the sorts of investment coming out of this pandemic that will actually get people back into work from industries that have been affected. And what we're talking about here, fixing up our homes, can be a really, really key part of that. So Renew, some of the things that we're really arguing for that I would like to see happening immediately are major government retrofit programs to replace appliances and get homes more energy efficient, so retrofitting our homes. Improving protections for renters with things like minimum standards for rental agreements. A program for building much needed public and community housing. So we've got a huge public housing shortage, and we should be addressing that by building homes that are all electric and are efficient to run and affordable to run. We also need investment in the grid for distributed energy resources, and we need things like community battery storage and power purchase agreements for large-scale renewables, so that people who can't access distributed energy resources have access to renewables through those mechanisms. And we can talk about that later on if that's useful. So that is my one thing, and I will leave it there. But thanks once again to the organisers for this event.
Thank you so much, Rob. I think that talking about equity, talking about, really considering how, like, the lack of housing affordability and other issues intersect with energy usage is so important. I've spoken to people in the west and southwest parts of Sydney who have electric cookers. They live in affordable housing, but they use portable gas stoves inside their homes because they find that more affordable than cooking on their actual stoves. So I think unless we can understand what drives people to do that, the economic pressures, the housing pressures, we're not going to be able to solve this problem. So thank you so much for that. Our next speaker is Anna Crabb, and Anna has this really fantastic bio I'm thrilled to read out. Anna Crabb is an optimist who has a deep commitment to fairness and integrity. As the Chief Executive Officer, Anna leads the Australian Energy Foundation team, who are at the forefront of finding practical solutions to climate change. Anna provides visionary leadership, builds effective relationships to deliver shared goals, and represents the AEF in the media and public forums. Anna models the AEF's values: inclusive, inspiring, bright, in service of an engaged and effective team and organisation. How fantastic. Please welcome Anna.
Thank you so much, Emma, for the enthusiasm you put towards that. And everything, Rob, you were saying, I was just agreeing, tick, tick, tick. And knowing that you were presenting on that topic, I just want to add Australian Energy Foundation's endorsement to exactly what you were sharing. And thank you, everyone who's tuned in to join and be part of this conversation as well. Because of Rob's focus, I'm going to take a slightly different and complementary tack, which is to really think about the opportunity that the wide-scale shift to working from home offers for us in terms of thinking about how we can harness the power and resources of employers to accelerate our transition to net zero carbon cities. So we really see this opportunity to work with employers to extend their ESG commitments, their corporate social responsibility commitments, to their working from home workforces through improving home workplace energy efficiency. This can help us get beyond those of you joining us probably today, the early adopters and the innovators, and to get to a substantial portion of the population to get them reducing their energy quick smart. So we know that the pandemic has fundamentally changed how many of us work. A PwC report earlier this year reported 3/4 of Australians said their ideal work environment is a mix of remote and in-person working. And Sydney University backed this up, saying that post-pandemic, Australians who have office roles are hoping to work from home 2 days a week at least. Some of these things might ring true to you. I assume many of you, all of us that are speaking, are joining from home today. I think probably many of you as well. Maybe you're thinking about adapting to hybrid work once we are able to return to our workplaces. And you might have got support from your employer to help you work from home, maybe an ergonomic assessment or a working from home payment. But did this actually extend to the thermal comfort of your home working space? Maybe you have a blanket on your lap or have a hot water bottle at your desk to make it okay to work. Maybe there's a draft coming through your door that you just can't stop. As I've started having conversations around these topics, it's amazing to think just how many people are working in suboptimal environments. And on the flip side of that, thinking about the payoff we could really gain from improving thermal and energy efficiency of our homes. So the opportunity we have is for employers to make their work from home policies also work towards building equitable net zero carbon cities. And there's 3 reasons why we believe that this is an excellent channel to get things accelerating. So first of all, trust. The Edelman Trust Barometer reports, very well regarded global reports, the last couple have clearly shown that people trust their employer. Businesses are in fact Australians trust business above media, government, and even NGOs. And so employers do have the attention of city-based employees to listen and to take action, and they are expecting more of their employers too, which feeds into the second reason around businesses now competing on emission reduction commitments, which is great to see, and need those to really be backed up with action. Things like RE100, renewable energy commitments, climate active, carbon neutral certification. This all creates the environment for companies to do more. So we just need to make sure that they are living up to their commitments by extending their responsibility to their workforce, which is now often working from home and, as I said, going to be in that hybrid working environment for some time. And the third reason, which I touched on earlier when I was asking about your hot water bottles, is around comfort level and well-being. So particularly employers working in a competitive, tight labour market, there is really that competition around retaining talent, being employer of choice. Businesses do focus on well-being. So in an office-centric environment, things like the yoga at lunchtime or the fruit for morning tea. I wish we had that. I'm not talking about our workplace, but many do. Many large employers do offer these perks to their employees. So in terms of shifting that to the hybrid model, there is a duty of care for employers to be thinking about their physical, mental well-being of their staff, and also the financial well-being, the cost shift of energy costs from the employers to the employees. We're very much seeing that already. And this isn't just high-end employees either. It's people like the administrative staff in banks, not-for-profit employees as well that we're talking about. So at the Australian Energy Foundation, we're focused on achieving an equitable zero carbon society. So to ensure this concept of focusing on employees working from home, employers would need support to provide education and information that's relevant to the diversity of their employees' living arrangements. So whether their employees are homeowners or renters or living with parents or in share houses, being sensitive to cultural and language needs in homes, particularly household size, and being appropriate to the climatic conditions across different areas of each city, like the great work that Emma does around sweltering cities in Western Sydney and Dandenong, and also between cities, depending on where their employees are located. And we're starting to see the larger employers thinking about this. Australian Energy Foundation delivered a session to 370 QBE insurance employees on sustainable and energy efficient options for their home. And KPMG and Deloitte both have global programs in this same vein. So when we were asked about, and we were thinking about what policy changes would need to activate this opportunity, we thought there isn't a clear policy change that's actually needed. Large employers that are in the ESG race are already on their way, building their brand trust and differentiation on their sustainability actions. We don't really need to wait for policy change to get started. And if we do focus on large employers, there's a really great potential flow-on benefit to the market in terms of stimulating market demand for home energy efficiency upgrades in areas like draft proofing and glazing and insulation, areas where more activity is sorely needed, which we could then extend across the whole of the population. To get beyond the large employers and the employees of these large employers, there are some policy changes needed, some of which Rob mentioned, which is around mandating home energy efficiency standards, transparency and reporting of those. That would be a very great complementary set of policy improvements to make. In terms of bringing it back to the employer focus, there is potential for WorkSafe regulations and requirements to be inclusive of minimal thermal comfort standards for employees working from home. So there is some tweaks now. Thinking about the scale of what sort of change this could make, I was quite gobsmacked when I got my team to run the modelling here. So I'll just run you through a few numbers to try and visualise what this might, the impact on our emissions reduction that this may have. If we take Greater Melbourne as an example, the last census, there were 1 million Melburnians in office roles. If we look at the ABS data from March this year, 40% of people working in office jobs were working from home at least 1 day a week. That equates to around 440,000 Melburnian employees working from home. So assuming we could reach just a quarter of these, that would be 110 people or 10,000 people or homes that could benefit from a small action such as draft proofing a home, which I saw mentioned in the chat already. This could result in a shift of at least 1 star in the NatHERS home energy efficiency rating. And so we estimate, based on these numbers, that could actually result in 95,000 tonnes of carbon saved each year. So if you were to visualise that, with each tonne looking like one hot air balloon, which sometimes float across Melbourne beautifully on a cool morning, this would look like 95,000 of those hot air balloons floating across the sky. And that's just in Melbourne. Think about if we spread this across 7 more Australian capital cities. It would be a beautiful sight. It would mean all those emissions were reduced. So to summarise, with the shift to the hybrid workforce model, employers can play a critical role to drive home energy efficiency across Australian homes, starting with their employees and stretching out across the whole of the Australian population. And we see this as a really crucial part of having resilient, sustainable future and equitable future for our cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. That is so fascinating, and I think the hot air balloon numbers is mind-blowing. We've been working with some teachers, classrooms, and students learning in hot classrooms, and just now thinking about all those teachers in Sydney and Melbourne who are now working from home in the cold or in summer in the heat, and that's not even something we've been talking about. So that raises questions for me, like what's the role of the public service? In potentially also leading the way in, those thermal comfort, thermal justice, energy efficiency reforms. And so we've been talking about energy efficiency upgrades, and now we're going to talk about the National Construction Code. So our last speaker, actually, before I introduce Michael, I just want to say please put some questions in. These fantastic speakers, you want to hear more from them. So add in some questions and then we'll be getting to them after this. So the last speaker for today is Michael Leeuw, who has also helped organise this session. Couldn't have done it without him. Michael manages projects with a focus on reducing carbon emissions from cities, encompassing buildings, infrastructure, transport and energy sectors. Michael has a strong stakeholder engagement and communication skills with a proven track record in translating research into sustainability advice for business and government. He managed the technical analysis, stakeholder facilitation, content delivery and publication of Built to Perform, a landmark initiative led by ClimateWorks and the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council to strengthen minimum energy efficiency standards for new buildings. So prior to joining ClimateWorks, Michael worked as a sustainability consultant at global integrated services firm Aecon, which I know is a huge company doing lots of infrastructure as well. So I'd like to welcome Michael, our last speaker, and I'll keep an eye out on those questions.
Great, thank you, Emma. Thanks for the intro, and thanks everyone for attending this breakout group. So fantastic to hear from all the wonderful speakers on the panel as well. Hello, everyone from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. My response to the question that Emma posed at the start of the session is actually, it doesn't relate to a new action per se. It's more about bedding down an action that governments agreed to back in 2019. And I guess lending our support to make sure that that action is followed through. One of the biggest steps Australia can take to building net zero emission cities is to strengthen the minimum energy efficiency standards in the National Construction Code, which apply to all new construction and major renovations in Australia. The energy efficiency standards in the code govern how much energy buildings use for heating, for cooling, and to some extent for lighting and also for hot water. This action is particularly important for houses and for apartments because the baseline energy requirements for housing hasn't changed much in over a decade. And over that time, we've seen jurisdictions across Europe and across the United States and North America commit to things like zero carbon and net zero energy building codes for new construction. So really, there's a real need to review and to upgrade these baseline energy requirements for housing after that long time without significant changes. The good news is that our state and territory governments in Australia plan to substantially update minimum energy standards for all new homes in Australia from next year onwards. The state and territory energy ministers actually agreed to this in a plan they published 2 years ago in their Trajectory for Low Energy Buildings policy. Now, the change to the National Construction Code hasn't been confirmed yet, but the government, via a body called the Australian Building Codes Board, or the ABCB, will soon be putting out a set of proposed National Construction Code standards for public comment, specifically for housing. Once these proposed standards are published, that will really present an opportunity to make sure that these stronger energy standards for new housing are embedded in regulations from next year. It's really in the interests of Australian households to see this change happen. We published research that Emma alluded to in the introduction with the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council that showed that a stronger National Construction Code could reduce household energy bills by up to $900 a year, saving a total of $21 billion in residential energy bills between now and 2050. And when you combine the changes for all building types, including commercial buildings, changes to the code could lead to around 15 million tonnes of emissions savings between now and 2030, and a total of 78 million tonnes between now and 2050. In addition to those energy bill and emissions savings, improving energy efficiency can also lower demand on the electricity grid. We estimated that to save around $12 billion in electricity network investments between now and 2050. And then separate to our research, there's a whole body of other research that the rest of the panelists have also alluded to that links energy efficiency with more comfortable housing that's safer and more resilient to both hot and cold weather across different parts of Australia. The other part of the good news is that households can reap these benefits with relatively simple changes to energy standards, like more insulation, better windows such as double glazing where it's appropriate for the climate, and better draft proofing to lower the amount of air leaking in and out of the home. And this can all be done during the construction phase of new housing. While I say these measures are relatively simple, only about 5% of residential buildings are being designed significantly above current code standards. Stronger standards in the National Construction Code therefore are needed to make sure that everyone building or buying a newly built home can enjoy these benefits, not just those who choose to build above minimum standards. And in fact, our research shows that the ongoing benefits of these strong energy standards outweigh any potential capital costs. Introducing these requirements for new housing, where it's going to be much more cost effective to implement these measures, will also make it cheaper overall to deliver better housing that reduces emissions, and will help ensure that the households of the future aren't faced with potentially expensive retrofit bills to bring energy efficiency for housing up to a decent standard. Now, we can't afford to delay these changes. A bit over 1 million homes are expected to be built between 2022 and 2025. And based on that, our research showed that delaying cost-effective changes to the code by just 3 years, so for example, implementing changes in the 2025 code as opposed to 2022, the code gets upgraded and reviewed every 3 years, could cost, that 3-year delay could cost $2 billion in household energy bills between now and 2030. That delay would also lock in around 9 million tonnes of emissions between now and 2030, and a total of 22 million tonnes between now and 2050. And that would mean that more would need to be done to retrofit existing buildings and also to decarbonise more intensive sectors of Australia's economy to reach the economy-wide targets of net zero emissions by 2050 or earlier. The first step for delivering these benefits for Australian households will be for our state and territory governments to embed the stronger energy efficiency standards that are being drafted by the Australian Building Codes Board, the ABCB, into the National Construction Code from next year onwards. So it applies to all new housing and the major renovations from next year onwards. The opportunity for industry and for the community to feed into this regulatory process will be opened by the ABCB fairly soon. And ultimately, adopting these stronger standards will help make it easier and more cost effective to deliver low energy bills, more comfortable and resilient homes, and to decarbonise Australia's built environment sector in the decades to come. So I'll leave it there and I hand it over back to Emma. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's pretty mind-blowing. Even a short delay in updating, doing what Michael recommends with the construction code would mean 9 million tonnes of carbon emissions by 2030. When we talk, I've said it, I think, in the panel intro to this, like, we're building the cities of the future today. We're locking in the carbon emissions of the future today. So we need to take action as soon as possible. So we're going to go to the Q&A now. There's heaps of really good questions. And what I'm going to do, which is cheating, is sort of take a couple of the questions and go to Evelyne and say, we've got a couple of questions about how do we get developers to build, renewable, 100% renewable, affordable public housing? How do we get the state government, federal government to do things? But what we started with Evelyne was, what does values-based planning mean? What does community influence on planning mean? And, I spend a lot of time talking to communities who feel really disempowered by, being a renter and not having control over their homes, by, the planning process being quite opaque, by, feeling like you can try and protect your local environment, but when it comes to it, the big developers are always going to get their way. And so we need to, engage and empower these communities. And I wanted to, start off with the community question and ask Evelyne, how can we empower communities to be part of building, the healthy cities of our future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that is the crux, isn't it? That's a
big question.
Yes. Look, it's something. Let me first reflect on something that you said about me and the organizations that I work with in the introduction. We are boundary spanners, so we explicitly see ourselves as having a role between community and government or whatever. And in healthy urban environments are collaboratory. It was set up as a network of 3 universities, a bunch of local health districts, and medical research institutes in southwestern Sydney. And we quickly found out, of course, that we don't shape urban environments. So we want to connect more significantly with developers and with local councils and with communities. And we go on field trips with them. So we go out into southwestern Sydney with developers and we say, so why did you build this in this way? What is going to happen there in that way? One of the things that we found, so two things I want to say here. Developers aren't the meanies. They're not the bad guys. They are incredibly well aware of the evidence base for healthy urban planning. They know exactly what they should be building. They are as disempowered as some communities are because they feel that they are in a double bind with council approval mechanisms, with the requirements to build quickly. They want to do different things, and we could use communities to facilitate and to enable and to legitimize more creative, novel ways of building new neighborhoods. The other thing is, so we're building an entirely new city in around the airport or close to the new airport that we're having here, which is stupidly going to be called Bradfield City. It should have had an indigenous name. Now the thing is, if you want to build that through community empowerment, there is no community. Who is going to be the community of Bradfield? So the challenge is to create a community even before a greenfield development like Bradfield is taking off. And you can do that because you have processes of engaging with the people that will be moving in to places like that, who express their interest in being part of it and engage with community networks. One of the things is that for us as boundary spanners, we facilitate access. So for communities to take control over the determinants of health, we need to show that we respect them, trust them, work with them on their merits, not on our merits. You know, we're not acting as some kind of evidence-driven university. We're advocates and facilitators. And there are big issues there, but as I said, there are many examples of how actually this does work very well.
I'm going to go to Rob next, again, with sort of mashing together a couple of questions. And there has been some questions about, bringing it up, basically about how do we make it easier for people who might have financial problems accessing green power or more electric services at their home. Is it zero interest loans? Is it, different types of funding? But, I wanted to also, there's a really great comment in the chat saying, it's not just about right now. We also need to be communicating about the lifetime costs that people might be having. So I wanted to ask you, Rob, how are we talking to people who might see it as too complex, too difficult, too expensive to engage with, but also how can we facilitate access? We've got a little while, so I'm going to ask you, as we have challenged the speakers every time, to do a quick answer, if that's okay.
Sure. Look, I think that people are keenly aware that the cost of upgrading things is costing us in the long term, and people who are on low incomes who are facing the highest barriers to upgrading those costs are very keenly aware that this is coming at a long-term cost. I think that the things that we need to do, first of all, are direct support and retrofit programs. So Renew has backed the National Low Income Energy Productivity Plan, which should be the response that this country has to the pandemic, instead of the home builder package or money that's being funneled directly into fossil fuel companies. This is what we should be investing in through government direct programs. I think that's the single biggest thing that that we need to do. We could have a lot longer conversation, but I'll leave it there.
I know that Anna also had some comments on this, so I'll go to...
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And I agree with you, Rob. One of the programs that the Australian Energy Foundation has been delivering is the upgrade of 1,000 homes for people with chronic illnesses, improving the thermal and energy efficiency of those homes. And so we're at the point where exploring different models for continuing that work, with government funding being one of the only channels. Victorian government is really great in that it does provide rebates for lots of different appliances, but there is still that gap for people that might not be able to have the $800 or $1,000 upfront to pay for those improvements to their heating and cooling, for example. So as Malcolm suggested, I think the no interest loan combined with the rebate has a real potential there. The other thing is, through this work that we are doing, it is a randomised control trial linking the health outcomes with thermal energy efficiency improvements. We know from previous studies that that link does exist. This will further firm up that point. And so when that is firmed up, this will really give us the evidence to show that by making these improvements in people's homes, it will have improved health outcomes. And so that means our health budgets are a way for us to make these upgrades possible. So thinking about particular portions of the population who would benefit most, people with a disability, people with chronic health issues, older people, thinking about how this might fit with NDIS and also with aged care packages. We're expecting our older people to live at home longer. They're often in homes that are not a great standard. We need to think about aged care packages, including energy efficiency upgrade improvements, to make sure our older people are healthy as well.
Awesome. Three more minutes. So I was going to go really quickly to Michael and ask, what are the political blocks? Is the building industry pushing back on the construction code? But you've got about a minute to do it, Michael. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So I guess traditionally one of the barriers to these sorts of regulatory changes has been the lack of evidence and data to show that the ongoing savings from energy bills, for example, can outweigh any potential upfront costs that come with increasing standards for new construction. And what we did with the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council was to try and fill that gap, was to really try and put together a very comprehensive set of evidence to show that actually the benefits outweigh the costs, and therefore it's viable to make these changes for government. And I can post, I'll upload the file in the little section just after I finish talking. I guess one of the other barriers is that the sorts of energy efficiency measures that we're talking about here, like double glazing, like insulation, a lot of it's not particularly sexy. A lot of it's hidden, don't really see it. Feel the benefits if you're using a home, but it's I guess it's a little bit tricky for consumers and people buying a home, people renting a home to engage with the amount of insulation that's in their ceiling, for example. And so something that we're trying to do is really raise awareness of all the profound benefits that can be had from these relatively simple and relatively invisible energy efficiency measures, and the role that the National Construction Code can play in improving those measures for new construction, to really increase the level of community support and to elevate voices of the community and people who are actually using and living in homes to be able to express that support to our political leaders, for example, to really show that there is a case to be made both economically but also politically in terms of the support from the people.
It really resonates with me, Michael. I think communicating with people, getting their backing for these changes, raising awareness is 100% what we need to do. I'm also going to take my second favorite quote from the session from Michael. Double glazing isn't sexy. And I think we just need to do better to make double glazing sexy and to make it more exciting. My other favorite quote was Rob saying, "We know how to do it." And that is totally my experience with the work that we do. Communities know what changes need to be made. We have so many solutions. There's lots of people in government and in the development sector who have solutions. Why aren't we doing it faster? And I think we've talked about that today. We've talked about lots of the solutions. And, I think from our perspective, like the key works, it's sharing knowledge. It's getting communities involved. That's what we're doing here at Sweltering Cities. As all the group spoke today, there's been so many great links shared to keep in touch with people. I've shared the link to keep in touch with Sweltering Cities. We've got some campaigns on the design and place state environmental planning policies in New South Wales, trying to get heat included as a much higher priority. We're talking about energy efficiency, thermal justice across the country, and we're going to be running a campaign this summer to get higher standards for bus shelters in our hottest suburbs. So if you're keen to talk about bus shelters and how we can have the best possible bus shelters of the future, please sign up. Yes, now we're all going to talk about making double glazing sexier. No, we're not. But I do want to mention that we've got a networking session this afternoon, so keep an eye on that. I'll be there, so will other people. Please follow the links, please sign up. Please follow all our fantastic speakers. I want to thank everyone for coming today and joining us. And yeah, I think that's our time up. So yeah, pleasure to have you all. Pleasure to be part of the conversation.
Thanks.
Shelters are important, Gail. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Now we're just here.